Hello, it's Mr. Brown. This podcast today is on terminating a patch cable. So this is geared towards the 120 and the 140 class on how to terminate your patch cable. So here's the tools we'll be using out of our toolkit. I'm going to kind of slide those out of the way so we can start our process of making a patch cable. Alright, first thing we need to do, we're going to use our wire stripper, this guy right here, to cut off some insulation at the end of our cable. So here's my cable, and I usually do maybe about an inch, inch and a half. If you do too little, it's tough to work with the wires. If you do too much, it's like working with a big pile of spaghetti. That doesn't work as well either. So I'm going to open up my wire stripper, slide it over the end of the cable, again about an inch. I'm going to give it maybe 1 to 2 turns around and carefully pull off my insulation. If I continue to use the cutter and go around in circles and circles and circles, over and over again, after I cut through the insulation, I start cutting through the wires underneath. And those little cuts down there, as I put them in a connector, the cuts will often line up and short out your cable. So I don't want to do that. And after I strip my insulation off, I always look down here to see if there are cuts. If there are, cut off your cable, start over. You don't want those shorts in your patch cable. So again, give it maybe 1 to 2 turns around, just enough to cut through the insulation. You'll kind of feel it. Boop, cuts through. Open it up, slide my insulation off, get that out of the way. Next thing I need to do is take my wires and lay them in color code order. Okay, so let's pause for a second. The color code we're going to use is the 568B color code, which as I look at pins 1 to 8, the color code is going to be white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. Now it looks a little odd, but that's the standard color code. These two are a pair. The two in the middle are a pair. The green pair splits around the blue ones, and the brown pair on the 7/8 pin. That's just how the standard's laid out. So we want to make sure we lay our colors in that color code order for terminating our cable. So as I strip my insulation off, one thing I'm going to notice, you notice I didn't barge right in here and start wrestling on my wires around. What I do is I carefully rotate my cable till the orange is on the left. When I do that, I'll see my brown wires on the right and blue and green are in the middle. That's how the color code's laid out. That's how the wire's laid out. So first thing I do is rotate my cable so orange is on the left, brown's on the right, blue, green will be in the middle. Next thing I'm going to do is untwist my wire pairs. Remember, the wires are twisted together for cancellation purposes, so we're going to untwist those just down to the insulation so we can put them into our outlet jack. So I'm going to untwist these, one of the wires, just down to the outlet jack, or just down to the insulation, if you will. And then we'll start flattening out the wires so that they can be put into our outlet jack. While we're doing this, just a reminder, with this particular type of cable, we are using stranded wire versus solid. Stranded Cat5 cable, if you will, or Cat5e cable is used for patch cables. Meanwhile, the solid wire, solid conductor wire, is used for installing in the walls or in your building to go out to the data outlets. So our stranded wire here is going to have a tendency to act like wet noodles. It's not going to go exactly where you want, so you just kind of have to be very diligent on your color code here. Next thing I'm going to do is, once these are kind of spread out, I'm going to start to pinch them almost like I'm holding cards in my hand if I were playing a game. So I'm going to get these white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. I'm going to start to hold these in color code order, and the next thing I'm going to do is try to take my wires and flatten them out. Now, I've seen people lay them on the table and use their fingers and flatten them out. That works. I've also seen people where they kind of wiggle them back and forth as they pull. That's what usually works for me. I've also seen people where they kind of go up and down like they're making waves while they're doing this. So find one of those that works for you. Flatten out the wires, because we need to get them flat and laying right next to each other so that they'll go into our connector. And once they're flattened out, there we go. White, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. Looks pretty good. The next thing I'm going to need to do is trim these to fit into my connector. Well, let me pause for a second. We need to for our connector, here's our connector. We need to have two things happen. We need to have, okay, let's take a kind of close look at this guy here. There we go. The connector itself, these little brass pins down here, they're kind of shaped like little teeth if you look a little closer in there. As I put it in the crimper, the brass pins get pushed in. They get pushed in this direction until they pierce through the insulation and contact the copper inside the little wires. So, I need to make sure the little part of my wires gets the whole way to the end of the connector. The second part is I need to make sure my insulation, now this is just a scrap piece, but I need to make sure my insulation gets in far enough into here that the little plastic triangle in this part of my connector, when we crimp, gets forced in to grab a hold of the insulation. So I need to get that in far enough, and I also need to get the little wires to the end of the connector that when I crimp, the triangle grabs a hold of the insulation, and these brass pins cut through the little wires in my connector. So this is kind of a balancing act. So what we need to do is kind of eyeball about how much of our wires we need to trim off. So if I lay this here, I see I need a little bit above my insulation to trim off. I've kind of learned over the years when I hold my wires, right about where my fingers are is where I cut. Now that's just from experience from me doing it. You'll want to eyeball that yourself, and the old rule of thumb is going to be you trim a little long if in doubt, because you can always trim more off. But the other thing is, being that these are stranded wires, when you slide them in the connector, they have a tendency to shrink back into the insulation, back into here if you will. So if you cut them a little long, just a little bit long, they're probably going to be just the right size when you slide them into the connector. So let me get my colors back here in order. White, orange, orange. Okay, white, green. Where are you, white, green? There you are. White, green, blue. White, blue. Green. White, brown, brown. There we go. Now they're back in color code order. I'm going to quick, again, flatten them out. And I want to, in this case, I'm going to hold my connector. Actually, I need to trim my wires, so I'm going to hold my connector this way to kind of eyeball. I'm going to trim right about where my fingers are. And I need to do it square. Okay, let me hold it this way so you can see. I need to do it square. I don't want to do it this way. I don't want to angle them. Because if I angle cut it like this, when I slide it in the connector, these will make it to the end, but these will not. So I need to do a nice square cut on it. Okay, white, orange, orange. Oop, white, green slipped into the wrong spot there. Let's fix her now. Okay, come on, fingers. White, orange, orange. White, green, blue. Get back here, white, green. White, orange, orange. White, green, blue. White, blue, green. White, brown, brown. There we go. Now we're getting it back in order. Okay. Orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. I'm going to trim them nice and square. I'm now going to hold my connector so the pin is facing the table. The little clippy pin on the back is facing the table, and I will slide that into my connector. And I'm going to try to make sure every wire gets into this little channel up in there. And I'm going to quick check the color code here before I slide it in the whole way. White, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. Looks good. Slide it in the connector, and I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for the little wires here to get to the end of the connector. Slide those out of the way. You can see a little bit of little wires getting to the end of the connector. And I'm also looking for my insulation to bottom out into this part of the connector here. It looks good. I'm going to do one last visual check. White, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown. Now I'm going to slide it into my crimper. Okay, here's my crimper. This style of crimper has a little ratchet mechanism here, so I can't over crimp or under crimp the connector, which is good. Good quality crimpers will do that. These jaws are actually replaceable for crimping things like coax plus twisted pair. Again, another mark of a good crimper. This can only fit in the crimping tool one way, so I'm going to slide it in. I'm going to hold in with just a little force this way as I crimp my connector. So hold in with a little force, give it a crimp, whole way. Once I get it the whole way, it'll release the connector. At this point, I have crimped. I should now be ready to test. Just a quick caution, some people want to test their cable before they're done crimping, and unfortunately you can't do that. Until you crimp it, there's no electrical connection in there. I had done the other end of my cable earlier, So I have both ends of my cable done. I should now be able to slide this into my tester to test it out. So let me get my scraps out of the way. I'm going to put my cable tester up here. This is the one that's in your toolkit. It comes in two pieces. That way you can have one in the wiring closet and one out where the user computer is. That's why it's in two pieces. We're going to take our cable and plug it into both ends, one into each part of our tester. I'm going to hit the on button one time. That turns it on. I'm going to hit the on button again for a test. And what I should see is 4 orange lights up here, one for each wire pair for the orange, green, blue, and brown. The SHD button is blinking. That's saying my shielding is no good. Well, I don't have shielding, so that's fine. And I should see a pass down here. That is a good patch cable. You'll notice on the other end I have all 4 lights on showing. Let me turn that back on. If my partner was out in the closet somewhere or elsewhere in the building, they'd see this and know that the cable's good as well. So there's a good cable. The other tester we have you use in lab, let me grab that guy real quick, is this one here. This is it's an expensive meter, but it's a network assistant, and this allows you to do many things besides cabling. But on this, there's an option that I can plug my patch cable in, both ends into the tester, and it will test my cable for me and give me what's called a wire map, which is very valuable. If I have a cross or something wrong on my cable, it'll show it over here as a map. Well, since we were making a straight through cable, I should see all 8 wires straight through, no crosses, no angles here, if you will. All 8 wires are straight through, and down here at the bottom it says my shielding is open. But there is my good straight through cable. So there's a good termination and good test for my patch cable. I'm going to change gears for a second and say, okay, what if I had a problem? What if I had indeed a problem with my cable? So I'm going to do something kind of sneaky here. I'm going to grab my little clippers out of here, and I'm going to clip one of the wires of the cable I just made. I know, that's crazy. I'm going to clip through the cable here and show you a fail. If for some reason I had a cable that something was wrong, or when I made it something was wrong with it, how would it show? Well, let me put it back into this meter real quick. And I'll test this one, and what I should see is at least one of the wire pairs is open now. So I'll do a test, and it's now showing a fail. Well, it doesn't tell me much until I use the little fault check button over here. So I'm going to use the fault check button, and I'm going to go through each wire pair. 1, 2 is good, it's passed. 3, 6 is good, it's passed. 4, 5 is good, it's passed. 7, 8 is open. There's a cut there. Well, yeah, Mr. Brown just cut it. That would be my brown wires, my white, brown, and brown wire. So if I did see something like that, I would be trying to look for problems with my white, brown, and brown wires on one of the ends of my patch cable here. This is giving me a clue as to what the problem is. If I were to plug this into my other meter here that we just looked at, the one that does the wire map, we'll bring him back. When I plug it in, I should see similar thing. I should see an open on the white, brown, brown wire pair, and it'll be down here, if you will. So we'll give that a second to send a signal through the cable and come up with an error. And down here, as I'm looking at it, oops, I have, let me get her plugged in there. There we go. Okay. And what I should see is there's an open down there on my one wire pair. Indeed, there it is. It's showing up as an open wire, that white-brown wire. There's a cut in it. So if I were trying to troubleshoot this, this is giving me an idea of what is wrong with my cable, or what sorts of things I should be looking at. So there is my patch cable termination, and real quickly how to test out the cable using both the continuity tester, this guy here, and then using our wire map tool, this guy here, and seeing the results on those.